So it is already July 10th of 2024. We have one episode remaining of The Acolyte. Episode 7 was a complete disaster. Let's just put it there. We know that there's everything, of course, wrong with episode 7. It is basically a repeat of what we saw in the third one, and everything that was wrong with that one as well by Leslye Headland. Now, at the same exact time, we know that those like Leslye, Kathleen Kennedy, Amandla, Stenberg, and among others are really defending the show like no tomorrow. They will never admit failure over this series. They will never admit that there's any kind of an agenda or anything related to that with their overall press tour for The Acolyte. And this is where things get even worse when it comes to damage control via Kathleen Kennedy and everything else wrong with the 7th episode. This is Mike Zero. Subscribe if you're new and like this video to see future updates. You can also follow me at Mike01. I thank you all so very much for the great and kind support. So, the biggest argument that I'm seeing myself from a lot of fans out there after what they witnessed in the latest addition to The Acolyte are a number of things. I mean, everything such as, for example, we have a lot of repeated footage from episode 3. We have a lot of predictable outcomes that happened with the characters of Mother Anastasia and Sol. We all knew that he killed somebody by accident that he deeply regretted. We all knew that right from the get-go. And what do you know? That's exactly what we got in episode 7. But what's even worse is the fact that there are moments in here where they try to literally rearrange the prequel trilogy, right? They make Anakin feel less special, they devalue the character by what they explained what Osha and May really are. They're basically this virgins in the Force, so to speak. You know, one person but two, something very odd and confusing. And we have Mother Anastasia literally predicting that the noble deed of the Jedi will ultimately lead to their demise, aka Order 66, the extinction of the Jedi. Now, what's interesting about this moving onwards is, of course, with the Acolyte finale set to debut on July 16th, those at Lucasfilm and Disney are already in panic mode after the recent Nielsen ratings report. Now, one significant development going on right now, however, has more to do with Kathleen Kennedy engaging in more damage control and attacking the Star Wars fans yet again after the Acolyte Episode 7 failed miserably across the board. Kennedy delivered the following. Our greatest challenge with The Acolyte was looking back at George's work on the prequels and where we could go from there, 100 years before The Phantom Menace. In Episode 7, we really wanted to retell what George did in the prequels, and Osha and May are a part of that retelling. I think fans don't understand that parallels do exist in this franchise, and just because one piece of storytelling is similar to another doesn't necessarily lessen the value of a specific character or a film that George created all those years ago. 7 and 8 truly will redefine Star Wars as you know it, and I couldn't be more proud that we got someone like Leslye to steer us in the right path, that where we wanted to go with the series. It was finally one of our additions that fully supports LGBTQ, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all the like that is so important in this world. I tend to hear many critics claiming that we took that direction over the storytelling and how we develop the characters. I completely disagree with that, because what was important to me was telling a great story. I cannot stress this enough, but we did not prioritize diversity, equity, and inclusion over how we develop these characters. We felt that amandla was the only option for someone as talented as her to play Osha and May. She and Leslye are truly experts on the lore and the expanded universe and how they wanted to fit it into their story. Many times women get a terrible rep in the Star Wars world because toxic men have been led to believe that this franchise is only for one demographic. We are aiming to represent more women gaining lead roles in many of our upcoming features. Whether it's a show or a film, doesn't matter. You see this especially with Episode 7 and just how important we knew it was to support actresses like Jodie Turner-Smith, who did an outstanding job as Mother Anastasia. We really wanted to change the perspective for fans of what the prequel films are all about. That doesn't mean that we are deliberately trying to throw dedicated and loyal fans away at all. That's not what it means. And I just think they aren't understanding the bigger picture with the latest episode and what we aim to do there. Everything will come together in the finale, and I think it's at that point where fans are going to see something very familiar yet new. We knew we had to shift away from George's vision. It was a must thing to do in The Acolyte to create a positive narrative for women by women. Guys, let me just stop again. Now, we all know that Leslye talked about this too. What Kathleen Kennedy just alluded to is that you're going to see something very familiar in episode 8 if you are a actual fan of Star Wars. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean it's a character cameo? Does it mean it's a specific location? Maybe it's an object, some kind of relic or, antique perhaps, who knows? But in episode 8, we will see something very familiar, yet at the same time very significant, and what it means for everything down the road related to Star Wars, whether it's prequels, originals, or sequels. Something around those lines will be deeply acknowledged in episode 8. But what's really all the more annoying has to do with what she's talking about when it comes to episode 7, of how everything that they did in 7 has nothing to do with any kind of an agenda of throwing fans to the wayside or discounting George Lucas' Star Wars. Then she goes into complete contradictory mode, where she does flip the tables again and says, yeah, we wanted to shift away from George's vision. It was an absolute necessity. So she doesn't know what she's talking about. She's flip-flopping all over the place. This is typical Kathleen Kennedy behavior. She always says one thing and then says things another way, 30 seconds to a minute later. Now, what's interesting about that, moving onwards, she goes on to conclude, this was a great launch pad for us at Lucasfilm to really provide women the limelight that they deserve in Star Wars, something that has been so absent over the years. However, this does not translate to any sort of an agenda at all, make no mistake. So, those like Bob Iger speak in a very specific and similar pattern like Kathleen Kennedy. I mean, they're both very similar, where they say, diversity, equity, and inclusion is not an agenda at all. It has nothing to do with any kind of a message that they're shoehorning into Star Wars or anything Disney related. They always say stuff like that, but we all know the truth. It is an agenda 110%. We all know it, and they know it. It's all about using that as a priority over proper storytelling, proper character development, and we all witnessed this, especially in the latest one, the latest episode that obviously just discounts everything that we saw in the prequels. Basically, like I said earlier in this video, Osha and May completely devalue Anakin Skywalker as a character. He is no longer the only character that is born through immaculate conception of some kind in Star Wars. And number 2, you have a lot of other factors going into this particular episode. Like I said earlier, you have Mother Anastasia having this prophecy about the Jedi are going to become extinct one day because of how out of touch with reality they are, and how they engage in a noble deed, yada yada yada, right? So again, I would love to hear what everyone has to say about the latest episode, because look, where we are right now, 7 was basically just a retelling of 3. They could have just combined the 2 and called it a day earlier on in the season and made it a very long episode, but I would like to hear what everyone has to say about that, and if you guys did enjoy the content for today, make sure to drop a thumbs up on this video to support the channel, and I will catch you guys later.